Hey guys, so on this video, I want to, this live, I want to talk about the things that you have to look out for as a landlord, right? The things that you got to be careful about when you're screening tenants as a landlord. Now, this is not just for current landlords, okay? It's going to really be for people who want to be a landlord, maybe those who are already landlords. It's also for property managers, but even if you're a tenant and you rent properties, you might want to pay attention to what I'm going to talk about in this video because it could help you as well, right? Because if you're a tenant, you kind of want to hear this information to know what landlords are thinking about, right? And so you want to know everything in this video also. So this video is not just for landlords, but the title says landlords because that's who it's primarily aimed at. But this information can go for anybody, renters, landlords, property owners, property managers, etc. On this video, I just want to give you some things to be on the lookout for when you're screening tenants and things that you need to be paying attention to when you screen tenants and you're renting out your property. Now, I'm going to be as honest as possible on this video. This is a live video, and if you want to add a comment or a question or want to drop it in the comment section, feel free to. We're just going to have a conversation about the things you need to be looking out for. And you're welcome to have a comment. And if you're watching this after the live, feel free to drop a comment then as well. And I usually 99 times out of 100, I get back to all the comments that I can get to. So, but it's going to be an honest and frank and upfront conversation. And if you don't like honesty, this video may not be for you. All right. And I'm just going to tell you the truth because you deserve to hear the truth. Right. The video is not meant to, I don't want to offend anybody. Right. But I want to be as real and as transparent as possible. Because, that's what you deserve as a viewer, right? You're trying to get the real deal, not just the pie in the sky, the fancy stuff. So I want to give it to you real on this video. I'm gonna give you 17 things that you got to think about when you're screening tenants. Okay. And let me just check a couple things, guys. Remember, you can drop some comments. Remember also that you can drop a question and I'll do my best to answer it during this live right here as well. But a little bit about me, guys. I was a tenant for most of my life. I was that tenant, right? Until I was about 30 years old, I was a tenant. I didn't grow up in a household that had a that where we owned our own home. No, didn't do that at all. I moved around a lot as a young person, and even as an adult, I moved around a lot. I had 14, I added them up last night. I had 14 addresses by the time I was 21 years old. I moved from apartment to house to apartment to house. My mother moved a lot and was with her, so we moved a lot, right? 14 addresses before I was 20, around the time I was 21 years old. And by the time I was 30 years old, just 9 years later, I had 21 total addresses, right? The last 7 addresses I had before I was age 30, I had between age 22 and 30. So the point I'm telling you that for, the reason I'm telling you that is because I know what it's like to be a renter. Okay, somebody that is renting a house and wants to rent an apartment. I know I've been there for most of my life. For the last 23 years, I've only had 2 addresses, right? Because I made a decision at the age of 30. A lot of things changed for me when I was 30. I made a decision to get on the other side of that thing, right? And so, since for the last 23 years, I've been a property owner and a landlord, managing my own properties and my own rental properties. So, and as a manager of properties, guys, I've had, hundreds of tenants, in the last 23 years or so or more. So I see this thing from both sides, a landlord side and a tenant side, because I've been both. So the things I'm going to share with you here, though, these are not things that totally disqualify a person from ever renting a property from you, right? So you don't have to disqualify people because of what I'm going to tell you, but these are things that you should be considering as a landlord or property owner just that's renting out your property. These are just things that you got to look out for and things you got to think about, right? Things you need to be aware of and take into consideration when you're thinking about putting somebody in your property and you're screening tenants, okay? So that's a little bit about my background, guys, right? Where I've come from and who you're watching. So I'm gonna give you these 17 things to consider and watch out for. So again, drop a comment if you want to speak on them, or if you have a question about them, feel free, guys. But the first, and let me start off by saying this: there's the Fair Housing Act. Okay, so you can't really have a discussion about screening tenants and picking a tenant without at least mentioning the Fair Housing Act, which makes it illegal. And I have a list of the things. Let me find the list real quick. But it makes it illegal to because of race, color, religion, gender, or sexual orientation, disability, familial family status, or national origin. Let's see, amongst other things. Yes. So obviously, sexual harassment. None of those things. So Fair Housing Act is important to know as a landlord or as a property owner, the things that you cannot discriminate because of, right? And the other thing that's really important, other than the Fair Housing Act, before we get into the discussion of what to look for, is you got to know what your local landlord tenant laws are. Okay. You got to know them inside and out, right? The last thing you want to do as a landlord or property owner, the last thing you want to have happen is a tenant that knows the landlord tenant laws better than you know them as a landlord, as a professional or a property manager or what have you. You don't want them knowing it. I mean, you want them to know it, but you want to make sure you know it just as well. So you need to know what the local landlord tenant laws are, the state laws are for your state. You want to know what you can do, what you can't do, process for eviction, and whatever the local legislation that is coming up, the state legislation, whatever the laws that are getting changed. You want to, and I always tell landlords to go ahead, even if you're just a part-time landlord who only has one property, you still want to get involved with the local landlord association, right? So you can understand and learn the laws and what's going on. So you don't run afoul of the law, right? With whatever you do. So you need to be a landlord that has some knowledge about what you can and can't do. Very important, guys. And a lot of landlords, they miss on that. And those are the landlords that you really don't want to be, right? Or the property owners that you don't want to be. So that's important. Know the laws. So I wanted to get that out the way because Fair Housing Act and the law, because the things I'm gonna tell you on here, they don't violate those things. So because I'm pretty aware of them. But your job as a landlord, your number one job as a landlord or property owner or property manager, there's really only one job. Okay. We get this thing all, mixed up and twisted and complicated. It's not, right? The only job you really have is to avoid a bad tenant, right? That's the whole point of managing a piece of property. Sure, you're helping people, you're helping families and all that, and that's good. You should be doing that. But you need to be avoiding bad tenants at all cost, because when you run into a bad tenant, you're going to have a bad tenant with a lot of cost, right? So you need to make sure that you're avoiding tenants with whatever you can do. But now, what is a bad tenant? Let's talk about that real quick. There's two things that make up a bad tenant in my mind. Now, I don't know what the books say and what the textbook version and all that stuff and other articles you may read, but after 23 years of owning property, there's really only two things that make up a bad tenant. One is a tenant that doesn't pay their rent, or they pay the rent late all the time, or they want to piece together the rent, right? I'll pay you half now and I'll pay you half on the 17th, right? That's a bad tenant. That's one thing that makes a bad tenant. They don't pay their rent when it's due in full, right? Because that costs you money, perhaps could cost you money, right? The second thing that makes a bad tenant is the obvious: a tenant that doesn't take care of the property, right? A tenant that tears the property up, a tenant that rips up stuff, rips up carpet, tears up walls, busts through walls, messes up the appliances that may be there that's not theirs. The tenant that ruins the property, right? So that's the only two things that make a bad tenant, right? It's just if you don't pay and you don't take care of the property, you're considered a bad tenant. So if you're a tenant that's listening to this or watching this video, just keep those two things in mind. It's only those two things that really good, seasoned, professional, mature landlords look at, right? That's it's not the only thing they care about, because obviously they care about your well-being and all that good stuff and your safety. But That's really important to every landlord or every property manager. If you just do those two things well, pay on time in full and take care of the property, then you're gonna, as a renter, you're gonna always have a place to stay. You're gonna always be desirable to landlords if you simply do those two things. You're gonna always get a good reference to the next landlord when you decide to move if you just pay on time and in full and you take good care of the property. So again, your number one job as a landlord is to avoid that tenant that doesn't do those things, right? And how do you avoid them? Let's talk about the 17 things I'm going to give you that you as a landlord should be paying close attention to. Okay. So number one, you as a landlord, you need to watch out for potential tenants that don't meet your qualifications or your standards, right? And when I say standards or qualifications, I mean, as a landlord, you want to have a written set of qualifications, um, and standards that, you know, ensures that the people that you're getting in the property, from your standpoint, your business model, whatever that may be, they meet them, right? Maybe your standards may be no pets, make over 3 times the rent amount, have no criminal violent or no violent crime arrest, and no prior evictions in the past 15 years. Whatever your qualifications may be. When you are screening tenants, you need to have your set of qualifications that are realistic and fair and follow the law, in place. And if they don't meet those qualifications, that's a problem, right? Whatever your qualifications or standards are, that's a problem. And you don't have to lower your standards as a landlord. You know, you can keep them however you want to keep them, and because you have a business, this is your business. So that's the first thing. If they don't meet your qualifications, then doesn't mean you totally disqualify them, but it just means that you need to be thinking about that when you're actually screening tenants. What is your qualifications, and are they realistic? Are they lawful? You know, do they fall under the Fair Housing Act and your local landlord tenant laws, etc.? And then stay with them. Number two, watch out for potential tenants when you're screening tenants that obviously have prior evictions, right? Now, no matter how long ago it's been, okay, no, it doesn't automatically knock them out of the picture, right? But this is what I do. I'm gonna tell you flat out what I do. When I have a tenant that has prior evictions, I'm always extremely honest with them before they fill out an application and pay me money. I tell them it's okay, and this is what I do. Maybe I'm old school with this because I don't like to put my application processes online and let people fill it out before they even actually see the property. I don't do any of that. I still do stuff old school, right? Have a quick conversation with you, maybe show the house to a bunch of people at one time, and before you fill out an application and pay me the money or pay the app fee, I'm always going to tell you, look, if you have an eviction, because some people lead with it with the fact they had an eviction, they tell you that up front, right? But if they had an eviction, I tell them, listen, it's not going to disqualify you, but it's going to put you further down the list of somebody that doesn't have an eviction. If I have 10 applications and 8 of them don't have an eviction, it's going to possibly put you at number 9, right? And I'm just honest. When you get honest and upfront with people, they appreciate it. And that way, that person doesn't necessarily have to pay for an application fee because they feel like, maybe I won't get it. But then again, I tell them also there may be only one other person, right? And there may be some other factors that's hurting them, and you still may have a shot. So the point is that you just tell them up front that the eviction will have an effect, right? One evict the goodness truth, guys. And I'm gonna be honest here, is that one eviction, it increases the likelihood of another eviction. It really does. Um, Not in every single, I mean, everybody's different. I totally get that, right? But if you've had an eviction and you're trying, and as a landlord, you're trying to evaluate, you have to realize that an eviction is a red flag, right? It's kind of like having a 400 credit score when a person goes to buy a house. It's kind of a red flag to the underwriter at the mortgage company or lending company, right? That, it's not going to totally disqualify you, but it's something that they have to think a little more heavily about, right? So again, doesn't take them out of the running, but you just need to be aware. And it's okay to give as a landlord, give them a chance. Nothing wrong with that at all, right? That's absolutely okay, but it's your call. Possibly a greater risk if they've had an eviction in the past, right? Whether they sometimes you'll get people that had evictions 25 years ago, right? Maybe that's a little different than somebody that had an eviction, 3 months ago, right? So you got to kind of weigh that out when you're actually screening tenants. Now, number three, be careful about the possible tenant that complains about their previous landlord. Okay. You're going to get this a lot. If you're complaining to me about your previous landlord, the chances are someday you will probably complain about me to your next landlord. You don't have to put this is something for tenants out there. You don't have to put down your last landlord to boost yourself up. Okay? You really don't have to. To me as a landlord and to other landlords that I know, it screams danger. Remember that? You guys ever watched Lost in Space? Remember that old show when they had the robot that said danger, danger, danger. It screams danger to a landlord or to a property manager when you go into a long story about how horrible your last landlord was, right? But you're talking to another landlord. Listen, if you're a landlord, be careful about the person that's telling you how horrible their last landlord is. And they will do it. Now, again, if that's you and you're watching this, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm telling you the truth. Me as a landlord, I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to ask you any question about your last landlord. I'm never going to ask you a question about that. You don't have to ever mention your last landlord to your potential next landlord, right? Your last landlord is not putting in an application to move into the property. You are, right? So all I really want to know, all any landlord or property owner wants to know about is you, unless they ask you specifically, tell me about your last landlord. Now, most landlords are not going to be doing that. I've never done it. So just something to think about. If you're a landlord and you're trying to put somebody in your property and they go into this elaborate story about the landlord didn't do this and the landlord, and I tried to call the landlord, and understand that if you're a tenant, you don't have to go into all that. Okay. Guys, do me a favor. Drop a comment below, smash the like button, share this video, subscribe to this channel if you're not a subscriber. We talk real estate, we talk US economy, we talk money management, we talk lots of things money. So that's what we do on this channel. And we do we do some real estate too. Not a whole bunch, but every now and then I want to have a conversation about real estate because a lot of folks come to me and say, "Hey, how do I get involved in real estate?" So that's number three. Okay, I didn't mean to jump off number three, but that's it. The red flag is the tenant that talks about their last landlord. Now let's go to number four. I got 17 of these guys, so hang in there with me. You want to watch out for the potential tenant that wants to negotiate everything. And when I say negotiate everything, I mean the deposit, the rent. They want to negotiate. Hey, can I repair this and repair that and take something off the deposit? There's nothing wrong with them doing that, right? But it could be a red flag, okay? The tenant because if they're negotiating with you now, there's a chance they could negotiate with you later. I don't have the rent this month, but can I go ahead and paint the outside of the house and you really don't really want to get into that type of thing. Now you can, I've done that before, but I've had some issues with it too. I've had some of it go well, had some of it not go well. But the thing about that is your choice. Just a little more risky when you're dealing with that type of potential tenant while you're screening tenants. Number five, watch out for the potential tenant that appears or seems too eager, right? Too desperate, right? Everybody has a story. Don't get me wrong. And you're going to get those type of stories, but too eager and too in a rush, be careful. Step back. I get that a lot when people say, well, I got to move in by this weekend. I'm out, I got to, and you want to hear, and you listen to their stories, right? Because sometimes people just need somebody to talk to and you say, okay, that makes sense. I understand. But I tell people that there's still a process that I have to go through. Okay. There's still a process. And I try to slow them down and say, look, we still have to do our background checks. We still have to do blah, blah, blah. And that way people are a little bit more at ease, but you just got to be careful. Again, doesn't disqualify them from getting in your property, but it does leave you something to think about when you're screening tenants, right? And you're going to have to listen. You're going to get sob stories as a landlord, whether you have one property or have 120 or 500 properties. You're going to get sob stories, right? Um, and you gotta be able to make hard decisions as a landlord, because there's going to be people that pull at your emotional feelings and your strings, right? They're going to pull your strings and give you this story about, I'm currently living in a hotel, and me and my 5 kids have been in this hotel for 2 months, and we really can't afford. And you're going to hear that when you're talking to people. If you're a property manager, you hear it a lot. If you're managing property for folks, if you're a landlord that manages your own property, you're going to hear it a lot. And you have to be able to make those hard decisions, right? When you're screening tenants, you're going to have to turn down people that you really don't want to turn down, that you really wish you could help, right? But you only have one property that's available right now. You might have 20 properties or 20 units, but you only have one available right now. And you got these 3 or 4 sob stories and people that really need help. You just have to be able to deal with that as a landlord. But watch out for the person. Be careful about the person that seems too desperate. Still go through all of your checks and check the boxes that you need to check to feel comfortable as a business, right? That's all I'm saying. And I'll leave that at that. But number 6 is watch out for the overly picky tenant, potential tenant, right? They come to look at your property and they call you on the phone and say, I saw this, and you mind if we take that chain link fence down, or do you mind if we go ahead and put up some awnings on the side and the front, and do you mind if can we go ahead and paint these 2 walls, and you mind if we change over the carpet color and lay some linoleum right here? And just be careful about that person, right? They want to change the property all around, and they're not even in the property yet, right? And maybe a lot of times they're trying to test how you are as a landlord when they ask these questions. And I'm always okay with it as a landlord, but just think about that. A person that is overly picky, something to be concerned about, something to think about as well. Number 7, watch out for the potential tenant that doesn't want you to screen them. The tenant that says, nope, now, do you do a background check? Now, that's a question right there that I've gotten a lot of times, right? Now, do you do a background? What kind of background check do you do? And that raises a red flag, because it's like, well, what type of background check do you not want me to do? And why don't you want me to do it? So if you're a tenant, if you're a potential tenant, don't ask that question necessarily. Just assume that everybody's doing background checks. Okay. Don't ask the question, are you doing a background? Because when you ask the question, are you doing a background check? Guess what? If I wasn't doing background checks, now I'm going to do background checks, because you asked that question. So let's just think about that for a second, right? You put a red flag in a person's mind when you ask them not to do a background check, or if they're going to do a background check. The person that doesn't want you to screen them is the person that maybe you need to be screening. Number 8, watch out for the potential tenant who wants to pay you rent up front in advance, all cash, right? Your rent is $1,000 a month, and they got $6,000 they want to drop to you up front. It's like, hold up, why? What are we doing, right? Why do you want to pay so much cash up front when you don't know if you're gonna, what's happening here? Now, I'm not saying that's bad. Of course, you may have an Airbnb where you have a traveling nurse who is going to be there for 3 months, and she knows she's going to be there for 3 months, or he knows he's going to be there for 3 months, and they say, I want to drop you 3. That's different. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the all upfront cash that's desperate, wants to move in quick, and they say, hey, don't worry about nothing else. Hey, I got all this cash, and they really, and I've had this happen. People flash the cash, and you're talking to them about the property, or what have you. The next thing you know, well, I got all this cash right here. Boom, boom, boom. I can just pay you right now. Back them up again, just like the other one. You want to slow them down just a little bit and say, hold up, hold up. To me, that raises a little bit of eyebrows. Okay. And I've had somebody pay a few months in advance, but I usually refrain from taking 6 months or a year's worth of cash up front as a landlord, right? All right. So number 9, the 9th thing you got to look out for as a landlord when you're screening tenants is the potential tenant that doesn't fill out the application process the entire way, right? So this tenant, they instead of filling out all the questions on the application, they fill out like half the application, right? And in your mind as a landlord, you're probably saying, well, why are you skimping on the questions and not answering the questions, right? Going past questions on the application process that, I, as a landlord or property manager, we think is important to answer, and you just skip them and pass them up. If you're a tenant out there, fill out the application as fully as possible. If you don't know something, right in there. I don't know, or I'm not sure. I'll have to go check, or I can get this later, or this small explanation in the area of the form that it says online. Um, but if it's on the application, the questions on the application for a reason. And so now, of course, that doesn't necessarily disqualify you in a lot of ways. It could for some landlords, um, but it doesn't look good, right? Right. And so as a landlord, I'm looking at that as if they didn't think that was important to fill out the entire application, and here I have three applications that are fully filled out in detail. Where do you think you're going to fall on the application rung of the bell if you didn't fill it out fully, right? So number 10, watch out for the tenant who doesn't have a job, or they have jobs with they've only been on their job 3 months here, and then 3 months there, and then 3 months there, right? So the tenant that has sort of hasn't been on the jobs very long, or sort of has a spotty work history, um, that's a problem, right? That's an obvious problem, because you have to be able to pay the rent. And in order to pay the rent and afford this 12-month lease that you just signed, then you got to have a steady work history, right? Listen, a lot of times when people lose a job, you're not going to get your rent, or you're going to get your rent late, or you're going to get your rent half and half, or so it's in your work history is really important. I mean, and looking at a person's uh, um, work history is important. A spotty income, source of income history could be a spotty payment of rent in the future. So just be aware of that. Again, this might be a part of your qualifications, where you say, hey, a person has to be on their job at least 6 months, or on their job at least a year, or whatever your qualifications may be. Pay attention to the work history when you're screening tenants, if you want to avoid issues down the road. Okay. Um, Now, the next one, watch out for the tenant. I had to make this in a list, guys, because otherwise I would have forgot about all 17 of them, right? So, watch out for the potential tenant that has these really strange or odd pet requests, or they have too many pets, right? Now, and when I say odd, I'm talking about, goats, pig, and you live in a city. Okay, you're in the middle of a city, and your unit is in a city. Now, if your unit is more in a rural area that may be zoned a different way by the zoning commission in that area, that's something different. But if you're in a urban area and they have, chickens, right? What does your commission, your zoning, say about chickens, right? But what I'm trying to tell you is that too many pets or odd pet requests, be careful. Listen, this is not against any pet owners, by the way. Some pet owners do a great job at taking care of the pets, and they still maintain properties very, very well. I've seen them immaculate, very well, right? But most times when there is a pet around, a pet is going to be a pet. An animal is an animal, right? Not all the time you have this happen, but a lot of the time, when a pet leaves a home, there was a pet in the home. I don't care how nice the home looks. There may be a smell. There may be extra carpet, or extra. If you have carpet, there may be extra hair in the carpet. Pets leave marks behind, right? I'm just telling you, when somebody has a lot of pets, eight, three cats, four dogs, two gerbils, a snake, and a iguana, right, and a bird, right. If this is how people live, then you best believe there's going to be something left behind when that tenant leaves, if they have all those types of pets. Again, some pet owners are on it, but sometimes, even if you're on it, when you have too many pets, it makes a difference in what you have to do when that person leaves the home and takes the pets with them. I had a pig in one of my properties, an inner city property. I had a pig in one of my properties at one point. They didn't tell me it was going to be big, but it ended up being ginormous. And I had tile on the kitchen floor, and it's slipping all over the floor, and it was huge. It was something I've never seen. I'm from the city, right? So I'm not a guy that has lived on farms, and I never seen an animal that close, that big. Okay, I mean, it was just like it was hard, and the pig is shaped so it's hard to tell which side is the head, which side is not the head. And pig, they just got this big old oblong body. It was huge, but so I had and the pig left behind what pigs leave behind, right? I've had tenants that had, 5 and 6 cats, and cats leave behind. When you get a cat odor in a home, cat urine odor, that's all. You almost got to change out the drywall to get that out of there, right? The ceiling's got to come down. Everything, you got to break that thing down to the studs if it's too many cats in one place. But anyway, the point is, pets, they cost money, and they cost money for landlords on the extra cleanup that needs to be done quite often. So be careful about that. Now, number 12, be aware of and pay attention to the tenant that is inebriated, right? I guess that's a word we don't use very often anymore, but the tenant that is high or drunk when they come to meet you or when they come to view the property, right? That stuff matters, right? Because if you meet me and I'm the landlord or I'm the property owner or property manager, and you're meeting me and you're drunk or you have been, you're high in some way, then what that tells me, if you want to do that, if you want to drink or if you want to do what you do in your own time, that's cool, not a problem. You do it on your own. But it tells me that when you're coming to meet somebody or you're coming to look at a piece of property, and it tells me you got poor judgment, is what it tells a landlord. You have poor judgment. And, you know, do you, as a landlord, do you want somebody who's renting your property that up front has poor judgment? Judgment matters, right? Um, are you going to the job like that? Can you keep a job like that if you go to, places to meet people or to look at houses or whatever you're doing, and you carry yourself like that, right? Judgment matters, right? It makes a difference when it comes time for me to make a decision between the person that was high when they met me and or drunk when they met me and the person who wasn't. Guess who's probably going to be in the property, right? So you got to think about that. And as a landlord, you need to be looking, not say looking, but you need to be paying attention to those types of things. But poor judgment matters, because if you got poor judgment like that, then there's a good chance you're going to have poor judgment when it comes time to pay the rent, maybe, or come time to take care of the property, perhaps, right? We don't know that. And it puts a question in a landlord or property owner or property manager's mind, right? Number 13, and I said I was going to be honest, so I hope I'm not, offending anybody. Sometimes honesty in today's age, it offends people, right? But sometimes people need to hear honestly what people are what needs to be said, right? And some of this stuff about what the things you need to look out for when screening tenants, it just needs to be said. As long as you're not breaking a law, a landlord tenant law in your area, or a Fair Housing Act law, right? You don't want to be breaking laws. But people that are property owners and property managers and landlords, they're humans, right? So they got to make human decisions. And some of these things, this is what I'm trying to explain to you guys in terms of what to look out for when you're screening tenants. So number 13, okay. All right. Appreciate it. All right. Somebody said first time catching alive. Glad you're here. Appreciate it. So number 13, now I got 17 of these. Now, number 13 is this: watch out for the tenant who has no control over their children. Flat out. I don't know really a better way to say it than that. I mean, when I rent a property out for the last 20 some odd years, and I manage my own properties, right? I don't have a property manager. And if you have one or two properties that you manage, then you can relate to this. But when I rent out a piece of property, I always tell the person, I said, I want to meet everybody that's going to be in the property before you move into the property. Everybody that's going to be on the lease, I need to meet. Kids, aunts, uncles, whoever you're putting on, whoever's going to be on the lease. let's get together, let's have a conversation. I can show you the house one more time, because these are people that I'm serious about putting in the property. We're at the end of the stage of screening tenants at this point, and I'm serious about them. They're serious about the property. They meet all the qualifications. We've done background checks, but I let them know that I need to meet everybody. So that means they have to bring their children. And you can learn a lot when you see, you know people's children that may be 3 or 4 or 5 years old or 10 years old, running around, swinging the door, slamming the door, lifting the window, slamming the window. There's nothing wrong with kids being kids, right? I got 3 of my own, right, and a bunch of grandkids, right? So I'm cool with kids being kids, nothing wrong with that. But when kids are tearing up the property, and the property is empty, and they just met you as the potential landlord, and they're bouncing off the walls all around you, then if they're bouncing off the walls in front of you, they're probably going to be bouncing off the walls when you ain't around. And they may be really bouncing off the walls when their parents are not around, right? So just think about that. That's just something you need to, when you're screening tenants, just be aware. Now that's kind of an odd thing, right? Because you don't really hear many landlords say that. But I'm just telling you because I'm trying to give you the real, honest, transparent truth about what landlords pay attention to. That's what they pay attention to. And I'm telling you, it's okay to pay attention to it. Number 14, watch out for tenants who will fill out the application. This is a big one. This happens more than you would imagine. They fill out the application, and they give you on the application the name of a friend or a family member instead of a previous landlord. Maybe you ask, if you go at an apartment or something, and you have to fill this out. They ask for a previous landlord or something like that. You're going to get people that lie on their application. They make stuff up on their application because they don't want you to call their real previous landlord, because they're going to give you a bad report about them. Listen, be careful about that. Pay attention to that. If you're a landlord or you're a property owner, property manager, and you're calling previous landlords for people that you're serious about putting in your property, there's a really easy way to figure out if this person is a phony or a real landlord or a real previous landlord. There's a really Listen, if you've been doing this long enough, right, I'm gonna drop some game on you guys real quick. If you've been doing this long enough, I know how to I can have a conversation, and I can ask about 2 or 3 questions to the person, and I can tell if they're really the landlord, the previous landlord of the person they're talking about. It's really simple because you can hear it. This is a little extra bonus game here, right? Landlords love to talk to other landlords about real estate. They love to talk about their real estate, what they have, what they don't have, and experiences of tenants and so forth. Landlords love talking to other landlords about their properties. Okay. So if I was to call a previous landlord on an application, I'm looking at online at the application, I see, oh, there's a phone number to a previous landlord or the current landlord. When I call that landlord up, we're going to have a conversation like 2 landlords, or we're going to have a conversation like a property management company and me, a landlord. And that conversation, it's not going to be, it's going to be a certain tone to it. There's going to be a certain way I could ask some questions. Oh, so this is the only, oh, so you have other properties? Oh, yeah, yeah, we got several. Boom, 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 boom. And now we're 2 landlords talking, or we're 2 property managers talking. That conversation is way different than if I call that person's cousin who's on the application as the landlord, who's really not a landlord. That conversation is totally different than my conversation with another property manager. Trust me on that. So when you're a landlord, pay attention to the previous landlords, because sometimes people will tell you the wrong thing. And if you call them up, typically, if it's a big property management company, they're going to ask you to send in something to make sure you are who you are. Send them a text of some type of authorization, and then you can have that conversation. They're real. But if it's just like their uncle Joe, who they said, oh, that's my previous landlord, and yeah, and I call their Uncle Joe, but they told me it's not an uncle, right? They think that I don't know that. I can tell really fast if Uncle Joe has other properties or if he was a previous landlord of this person. Trust me on that. Just a little bit of free game there. So that's important. As a landlord, be focused on that, right? Because if they lie to you on the application, they're going to lie to you on something else down the road when you have them in your place already and they're a tenant of yours at that point. So, those things are red flags for me, right? If I feel like this person has given me a phony or fake person on an application, I move on to the next application because that tells me they lied on their application. And you don't want to do that. So be careful about that, landlords. Now, number 15. Number 15 is this. Watch out for the tenant who has a hard time answering your questions with a straight face. Remember I said, you ask questions and so forth. But again, if they don't seem genuine or that you get a feel like there's something dishonest and you ask a few questions, and as a landlord, okay, I'm a little different, old school, like I told you. So I have a conversation with everybody that I'm serious about putting in the property. And if in that conversation I ask you a few questions, I tell you up front, I'm going to ask you a few questions. So, don't be mad at me, but I just want to make sure, some things are accurate and that, that I understand everything. So I ask questions up front to that potential tenant. And that way, because I tell them up front, I don't want to waste your time. And I know you don't want me to waste your time. So let me just ask you a few questions. So if you ask a few questions and they can't answer them, or you're not they feel a little disingenuous with the answers, that's a red flag. Be thinking about that. Now, you know, every landlord may not be able to do that. Every property manager may not be able to do that. But if you do this long enough, you can do it in a non-evasive, friendly manner that where you're nice and cordial and you treat people with respect. Very important. Always treat your potential tenants with respect because they're humans and they're people, right? And they deserve to be respected because they're humans. But it's okay to ask a few questions. And when you're asking those questions, you need to turn on that sixth sense, that intuition that you have, right? Everything is not cut and dry on a piece of paper on an application in black and white, right? Because everybody can look good on a black and white piece of paper, right? But when you actually engage with a person, that's going to be the thing that can separate people from one end of the spectrum to the other end, is engagement with with these people that you're potentially putting in your properties. Very important. And if there's any there's any dishonesty, then you'll know it and you'll feel it. And think about that as a landlord, as a person who's screening tenants. You don't want to use just what's on the piece of paper, right? You want to use your own ability to discern and decipher what you're listening to, and get a feel for the person. Those things are important. Um, for many, many years, I would never just bring myself. I would always make sure I had someone with me, daughter, wife, somebody to go along with me, because I may be missing something when I'm interacting with a person, and my intuition may not be kicking in, but their intuition is kicking in. So, things to think about. Number 16. Number 16 is this: when you're screening tenants, landlords, be careful. And this is how you can help avoid bad tenants: is watch out for the tenant. And this is a pretty obvious one, but the tenant that has really bad credit or bad credit report, right? Credit matters, right? I wish it didn't, I wish it didn't matter as much, but it does matter, right? It shows your ability, or potential tenant's ability to pay, and their willingness to pay or not pay, right? All of that stuff matters because, again, the two things that make a bad tenant are tenants that don't take care of the property and tenants that don't pay and pay in full on time. So credit is not everything. Again, that doesn't necessarily have to disqualify them because they have poor credit, but it gives you an opportunity as a person that's screening tenants to make a better, more informed decision about this person. Credit is also something that you may want to have in your requirements, your qualifications, right? Your qualifications, part of them, or one piece maybe, must have a 550 or better credit score, whatever it may be, right? 600, 650, 700, whatever it may be. But the point is that take a look at that. It matters. It makes a difference in terms of their history, their proven history of being able to pay things back or not pay things back. And remember, there can be discrepancies and problems on credit scores or credit reports as well, right? But a bad credit score is a bad history of paying things back. It's sort of like an evictions, right? There's a history, there's a pattern, right? And I've had people that said, I have good score, I have a great credit score, and they have like a 440 credit score. I have people that ask up front, hey, do you check credit? Because I've had some issues with my boom, boom, boom. And that's cool too, right? But listen, if you have a 440 credit score and somebody has a 700 credit score, a lot of landlords are going to look more favorably at the person that has a 700 credit score. That's okay. And it's okay to tell people that and be honest, as long as it's not violating a law, as long as it's not violating, because you are a human being. You have to make a decision between somebody that has a 400 credit score and somebody that has a 600 credit score, right? Nothing wrong with that. It's your decision if you're a property manager or your property owner or landlord to make, right? Now, I said I got 17 of these, and here is number 17. Be careful about tenants that move too much, right? They were at this place for 3 months. Then they were here for 4 months. Then they lived over here for 6 months. And they're not a traveling nurse. They just are moving to and I said, now I left this for last because it's kind of ironic, right? I'm the guy who at the beginning of this video said I lived in 20 plus places in my 30 years of living because we moved a lot all the time. And I moved a lot when I became an adult, right? From age 22 to 30, I had 7 addresses. Okay. So it's kind of ironic that I would say tenants that move too much, but as a landlord, you don't have to necessarily disqualify them because they move a lot, but you want to ask questions because it could raise a red flag. When you're screening tenants, it's okay to ask the question, why are you moving so much? Or why did you move 3, 4 times in the last 2 years? Was there a particular reason? And then now you have an opportunity to discern based on what they tell you, and you've asked them the information. So now if they're sharing information about a previous landlord, it's cool because you asked the question, right? So the point is though, when you're a landlord, you have to be careful when you're screening tenants because are they breaking leases every time they move? Or are they not breaking leases, right? So guys, these are things to think about when you're screening tenants to help you avoid the potential bad tenant. They're not things that automatically disqualify a person, right? They don't automatically disqualify them because there's also the human element as a landlord or property manager where you can have set certain guidelines, but it's not going to be horrible if you go outside those guidelines or if you give someone an opportunity, and that's okay. Because I know when I was growing up as a renter, there were a lot of folks that gave my mother an opportunity, right? So there's nothing wrong with giving a person an opportunity. And I've given many opportunities that went a little bit outside my qualifications, but I just felt like I wanted to help this particular family get a property. And that's okay too, right? As a landlord, just understand the risk, right? Understand the potential problems, understand your set of qualifications. And it's okay if you go outside the lines a little bit because this is not all got to be black and white. It'd be a little gray area right there. Maybe the credit score wasn't 700, it was 680, right? And maybe they moved twice in the last year, but they had good reasons for it. You need to be, as a landlord screening tenants, that's why it's important to be able to use a little bit of your intuition, a little bit of your sixth sense, use your qualifications and standards, use the Fair Housing Act, use your local landlord tenant laws. All of those things come into play when you're helping or when you're trying to avoid a bad tenant. Okay. So, guys, listen, that's my 17 things. And for landlords that are out there, again, this is quality information for tenants, right? How to approach a landlord or a property management company, what to say and what not to say. That's really a lot of what I gave you in this video, and it's good for good for landlords. It's good for property managers and people that are thinking about becoming a landlord. Right? Do me a small favor, guys, and drop me a comment below, and it can be a comment or a question about any of the 17 things I mentioned in this video. And if you're thinking about becoming a landlord, feel free. I have a whole playlist of 50, 60, 70 videos about tips for landlords or potential landlords. Everything from the types of clauses you need to put in your leases, what to look for when you're buying your first rental property. All of that is here on this channel. And you can, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on. I come on here at least once a week, usually Thursday afternoons like this around 4:35 when I actually get off my own job because I do have a job. So I have rental properties and I have a job. I make money in all kind of ways, right? But I want to help people that are considering getting into the real estate game, right? Even though I know we have a tumultuous time going on right now with inflation and interest rates being hiked up and banks crazy, but it's still a good time to buy real estate because everybody needs a place to stay and always will. So if you want to be a landlord, this is a good place to be at on this channel. We talk money, we talk US economy, we talk money management, we talk real estate, and a lot of stuff I have is for beginners in real estate. Okay, so it's good for you. And then join me right here on this channel about 4:30 every Thursday, and we'll have conversations, guys. Hey, listen, I'm gonna check the comments real quick. Just a couple of them. Awesome, guys. Glad you're here. Thanks so much for being here. And drop that comment below for me. Smash the like button for me as well. Listen, the best person that's going to take care of the old you is the young you. Guys, take care of yourself. Until next week, take care of other people as well. All right. Until the next video, peace.